let's talk about Mercury retrograde. It's going to be a good Mercury retrograde. Mercury is turning retrograde in Taurus on April 21st and is just one day after that big season opener, Aries solar eclipse, new moon, etc. Mercury is going to be making sextiles to Mars, Venus, and 2 sextiles to Saturn. I'm going to go through each one very clearly so you'll know exactly what happens when Mercury is sextiling each of those planets and the dates. It's important to know. And just real quickly, what even is a Mercury retrograde? I'll just go over this really fast. Mercury retrograde basically happens 3 or 4 times a year, and it lasts for 3 weeks or so. All the planets except for the sun and moon go retrograde at some point. Mercury does it a lot. There's an appearance of the planet looking like it's going backwards in the sky from our vantage point on Earth. It's not really going backwards. But the day after the eclipse, Mercury goes retrograde, and in addition to that eclipse, we have some major Pluto activity as the sun squares Pluto for the first time. It's the second new moon. It's a lot. What does that have to do with Mercury retrograde? Okay, I'm going to explain. It means a lot of changes are coming. That's for sure. 100%. You don't need to be an astrologer to figure this out. The astrology is matching up, but you don't need to be an astrologer to figure it out. This Mercury retrograde is happening at a time right before a big turning point. Over the next 3 weeks, as Mercury turns retrograde, Mercury is only making sextile aspects this entire retrograde period, and when it stations direct and moves forward, still sextiles until June 4th when it makes its conjunction with Uranus. So what is a sextile? A sextile is a 60-degree angle aspect between 2 planets, and sextiles are sometimes referred to as sort of sexy, enticing, stimulating, exciting. They're really seductive words that go along with sextiles because they're of the nature of Venus. And another way I like to think about sextiles is that it's basically like a stimulating meeting between really good friends. The 2 planets are acting as supportive friends for each other during this period of time. Just to put yourself in that feeling of a sextile, think of a person that you really enjoy, a good friend that you connect with, and the conversation is never dull, and no matter how long you spend apart, when you come back together again, it's like no time's passed. This is a sextile. And the 2 of you are just so much alike in a certain way that you can understand each other. But this is the part that's cool, is that you're just slightly different enough that you can complement each other and add something new to each other's life. Something enticing, something exciting, another layer to each other's lives.
Whatever I say, you agree to it and you add some new information.
Okay. All right, let's go.
It kind of reminds me of improv. It's like yes, and it's never no. You know, a sextile is like, yeah, and oh yeah, we can do this too. Okay, that's a sextile. So taking into account that Mercury is in its retrograde, it's not making any challenging hard aspects to any planet for this entire run. And that indicates to me that this could be a really stimulating, inspiring time for Mercury-related things. Mercury retrogrades are famous for being times of slowing down, reevaluating, rethinking things. Retrogrades are all those RE words that you can think of. For practicality's sake, it's not always the best time for technology or for signing contracts. You'll hear that a lot. Oh, it's Mercury retrograde, my phone stopped working, or my email didn't go through, or we've missed one of the signatures. That happens in Mercury retrograde. But with this information, with the sextiles, you could have some mitigation of the snafus that Mercury tends to have when it's retrograde. Let's talk about the details of this retrograde Mercury Taurus. I'm going to give you the detailed timeline so you understand exactly how to make the most of this Mercury retrograde in Taurus. Mercury turns retrograde within less than 2 degrees of a conjunction with Uranus. Why is that important? When we look at the Sabian symbol of where Mercury turns retrograde, it's Taurus number 16, an old teacher fails to interest his pupils in traditional knowledge. Oh, the Libra full moon. Oh yeah, remember that. So the Libra full moon, we were talking about the Sabian symbols of the retired sea captain in the port and the 2 older ladies that were sitting on the bench together, how those 2 images are very much about being at the end of a cycle and having wisdom, but maybe people don't really care anymore because things are changing. So this is another version of that. An old teacher fails to interest his pupils in traditional knowledge. Now, Rudyard says the keynote for this is the inadequacy of past knowledge in times of crisis. A lot of things are pointing to crisis mode coming up, and I don't want to make anybody afraid or anything, because this Mercury retrograde for me is a positive period. It's a positive time. But with it stationing right there, it's a pinpoint, it's a marker of, hey, pay attention to this. I have some personal experience with being a teacher, and I've been working with children in the last few months again. And I go into the classroom, and these children are definitely different than when I was teaching before. It's definitely a change. They are not very interested in slowness. They're not very interested in listening. It's a totally different game, because even if they were interested, they just can't keep the attention that long. So you have to keep resetting their attention constantly. But at the same time, these little kids have been born into Screenville, I'm gonna call it. I mean, like, there's screens in front of their faces constantly. When they go home, when they're at school, even the teachers teach on a projector that they sit in the back of the class and they project. So I'm going into these classrooms, and sometimes the technology doesn't work. And I have to tap into my old teaching skills, where you stand up at the board and you teach people. You teach them in a traditional way. And the thing that I find, which is interesting, is they don't get that at all, because they're always getting filtered through some sort of screen. And even when there's an actual teacher in the classroom, when it's done right, they have so much attention to direct towards an old style, an old method. So I think this retrograde period is, again, it seems like the same message that I keep seeing over and over again. It's about, what do we need to keep from the past? Not romanticizing the past, not making it more, or nostalgizing the past that it's something, amazing. There's always been issues, there's always been problems. But there are good things. We can't just throw everything away. So we need to filter through all of those old methods and find the things that we need to keep and bring forward into the world, into the future. Rudyard says, the type of wisdom learned from the past remains in the background to be retrieved later on its new forms. What is emphasized is change. Traditional concepts are not adequate to confirm the new conditions of existence. Thus, whenever the symbol comes to a seeker's attention, it indicates that even the most consecrated tradition does not have the real answer to the problem. In its last retrograde in Capricorn, Mercury made 3 trines to Uranus. It was in December and January of this past year. And with it turning away just before it comes to a conjunction with Uranus, it tells me that Mercury's not ready for this meeting.
Goes for quarterly reports. They are unreadable. They're just numbers and boring and blah.
It's like, not completely prepared to meet with you, Uranus.
So what I was thinking is that maybe we should have some sort of graphic, like if we have a bad quarter, put in a storm cloud.
I need to gather my things, gather my meetings with my other sextile planets.
When we have a good quarter, fireworks or a race car. Doesn't have to be a race car.
And I will get back to you, okay? 3 to 5 weeks. I'll see you soon. The message that Uranus needs to hear from Mercury, it's not prepared, it's not complete. Maybe we're working with old information or old modes of operation that needs to go the way of the dinosaur. It needs to go. There could be some frustration here because it's not comfortable to release the past. And that's coming even harder from Mars. Mars is the warrior, and Cancer, there can be a heavy desire to hold on to the past. But there's only so much recycling of the past, of that same old thing, that can be done before there's nothing left of the original. You can't keep, it'll disappear, the original thing, eventually. I've read some studies about memories that it's a dualistic thing here too, because the more you pull up a memory from your mind, the more it cements or solidifies into your long-term mental storage. But every time you bring it up, it also gets corrupted each time. It loses a little bit of its truth, or it's augmented, it's changed. Some things are forgotten, some of the details, without you even knowing it. It's unintentional. Every time you bring that memory back up, it's not going to be as close to the reality as what you think it is. Just like that recycling analogy, it starts to change until that memory eventually is not a true account of what happened. This is the timeline that's important to know. Mercury meetups pre-Uranus conjunction. Number 1, Mercury in Taurus is going to sextile with Mars in Cancer April 24th. This could be a toning down of reactionary emotional responses. You get more of a rationality from Mercury to that emotional response from Mars. Also, we're going to be thinking more about what's worth fighting for. Thinking about love, nurture, kindness, home. This is a really good time to have some clearing of the air and communication with loved ones, family, old friends. There's an opportunity for forgiveness here for things that are long in the past. Just finally letting things go and not being so emotionally connected to that. You can clear your mind of debilitating memories from the past, cut them. Mars cut those old memories out. It's a really good time for releasing ties to the past that are holding you back. Number 2, Mercury in Taurus sextiles Saturn in Pisces twice. It's going to sextile on May 12th and May 19th. So those are bookends, basically. Mercury and Saturn already sextiled earlier in April. So Saturn being in Pisces, that's the realm of imagination, inspiration, and there can be some solid creative thinking during this time, deep mental focus, inspiration, imagination coming through. This is an understanding that's deep and meaningful, a time for careful thought and inspired speech, inspired writing, communication of some form. Number 3 that's interesting, that right between that Mercury-Saturn sextile sandwich, we have Mercury sextile Venus. Now this is probably my favorite of all of these sextiles. It's happening May 13th. Mercury's still coming from Taurus. Venus at this point is now sextiling from Cancer. So she's co-present with Mars in its exile. But here's what it can bring. Some really happy thoughts, some good memories, conversation with old friends, possibly conversation with family about memories, some nostalgic good times, going back on the wings of a song or a smell or a picture or even seeing an old t-shirt or something like that. Just flowing on that and remembering the good times in your life. Mercury's picking up that flip side of the hurting Mars. This is going to be more of a time of the bounty of the sea. This is beautiful, inspiring, it's heartwarming. This is camaraderie, this is love, affection, and easily communicated. So this could be the forgiveness moment, like maybe if up above when we were talking about when Mercury was sextiling Mars, if you do have that conversation that's tough and finally to get to some forgiveness, maybe you get to this point where you can feel a little bit more released. You can feel a little bit happier when Venus and Mercury sextile. Because it's sandwiched right in between those two Saturn sextiles, which are really good for creative, imaginative work and bounding it and getting something to bring back. This is an excellent time when Venus is sextiling to have some revision of your creative work, bringing back an old idea and revisioning it. Editing is really good during this period, integrating new levels of stimulating beauty into your art or your craft. Just have a nice day on this day, I hope. It seems like it's a nice period and has a lot of potential to bring something concrete, to have some happiness in this period of time. That's the end of the retrograde period when Mercury stations direct. We're going to go forward on May 15th. The next thing that's coming through is going to be the conjunction. So there's no other aspects until this conjunction of Mercury and Uranus, which is delayed until June 4th. It makes me think that around this time there could be something surprising or shocking that could come into the world. Some big, kind of mind-blowing revelation. Something that comes to light that's seemingly out of nowhere. So Mercury's collected all these, nice little sextile jewels along to bring it into this next period where Mercury and Uranus are going to be conjoining. The conjunction of Uranus and Mercury happens just exactly 1 week before Pluto retrogrades back into Capricorn. On the shadow side, we could be getting some big financial or structural or geopolitical news that's probably surprising. This could be challenging for our world, for especially Western nations, I think it could be specifically challenging. Yeah, we're going to be seeing more of the de-dollarization in the news. I've been talking to my family about that for a year and a half now, or 2 years. And they've been like, oh, when's she going to stop talking about de-dollarization? But now it's finally starting to come out into the news. All sorts of things are starting to come through with a change in the reserve currency, which has been the dollar since the 1970s. And things are starting to change. And I think that's going to come into play a lot during the summer of 2023. So this could be a challenging time, but the Mercury retrograde period is a time of lovely sextiles, of lovely experiences to get together and to be with that good friend and get that good friend feeling for pretty much the entire retrograde, and to possibly prepare for those big changes that are approaching. And that's the best advice I can give. Focusing on those beautiful moments, on those positive transits, those positive, beautiful opportunities, we can keep them and bring them back out when things get harder and lean on those. Mercury sextile Mars in Cancer can help release you from some pain from the past. Moving forward, forgiveness. Mercury sextile Saturn can bring through something very imaginative and concrete that you can take along with you on this ride. And the Venus Mercury sextile can inspire you to express that truly lovely, radiant soul that's inside of you. Find someone to enjoy that with, you know? And with all those three things together, it's a layering of protection. It's a layering of happiness that you can have for the harder times. We can use these sextiles as friends that never let us down and that always have our back. Yeah. When I was talking with my friend Antoinette and we had our conversation about the Aries new moon, Aries eclipse, solar eclipse, I really loved that experience with her, and it inspired me to start my podcast, finally take that big leap. So if you're interested in podcasts, you can go ahead and give that a look. My podcast is called the Astro Mosaic Podcast, and that's linked in YouTube, and it's exciting. I'm excited. I hope you like it. It's very conversational. My first episode is about my story, how I got into astrology, and it's a discussion on whether or not astrology is real and how can you prove astrology. So it's something that comes up from time to time, and there's a correlation to dinosaurs. So that's a silly one. Anyway, I like you just the way you are. I hope you're doing well, and I will talk to you next time.